Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fire and Forte, and welcome Jocelyne Royer.
Hi, Hannah. Thank you for having me on your show.
So thrilled to have you join us because we've already had such a good chat about so many good things, but I'll introduce you to the audience first. Berlin-based Jocelyne Royer is actually French and has led brand strategy and design for 2 decades. From luxury cars to boutique hotels and music events, it's safe to say your luxury brand is in safe hands with Jocelyne. And hopefully quite cool hipster hands as well, because she's in Berlin. And if I remember Berlin correctly, it's pretty edgy and cool. With a passion for fashion and technology, Jocelyne is forward thinking and got involved with blockchain from what I know of in the last few years when you became the CMO of Pragmify. And I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your views on fashion and technology, not least because I saw a post where you were talking about Berlin Fashion Show and had some insights around the digital nature of those. So super interested to hear about that. Jocelyne is also a mum to twins, which is quite new news to me. Unbelievable. We'll cover that off as well, and is now moving her skills to educating other women in key areas such as blockchain technology. So there's so much I want to talk to you about, obviously, Jocelyne. Welcome to Fire and Forte. I'm actually going to start by saying, so you are in your 40s. I have confirmed that with you. What's your views of the 40s?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the amazing introduction. I think I'm going to watch this and write down everything because this must be one of the best introductions I've ever had. How is it to be in my 40s? It's great. It's awesome. Thinking about it, I remember how nervous I was or anxious before that day where I turned 40. I don't know. There was something in my mind that felt like the day I was going to turn 40, life was going to be over. I don't know why. It's ridiculous. I don't know if you went through something like that as well. But literally, yeah, I woke up that morning and I was like, okay, this is it. I'm 40. And, the fact that it had happened, I felt good about it. And ever since then, I've been feeling amazing about it because I think we were talking about this earlier on. I feel like being 40 is the decade where I am allowed to be myself, or at least it's my goal as well. The decades that I had previously were very, very, very interesting, being a child, being a teenager, a young adult, starting a family, all of that was great. But there was this feeling of always having to fulfill expectations that were set by the outside world, either by my family or society. I felt like I was expected, to study, to go abroad, to start a family, to tick all those boxes. And I did all of it. And now I'm 40. And now it's my time to thrive. And this decade is definitely about me fulfilling my potential, finding out what I want to do. And that doesn't have to be one thing. I'm totally open to changing things over or throughout this decade. But yeah, it's going to be very focused on myself, my needs, and creating my dream life.
That is so enthralling to hear and very engaging. I want to be a part of it. And what about we'll come back to what the 40s might entail and what you've got planned. But you've talked about travel and study and expectations. When I looked at your career history, and, for me, marketing was always my, key career, something I always loved doing. And I looked at your CV and thought that is a marketeer's dream, starting off at Bentley, moving into boutique hotels. So what's kind of a potted history of how you got to where you are today?
Wow, that's a very interesting story. I was actually talking about careers and, building your career with my children this weekend. And they asked me, like, Mom, when you were at school, what did you want to become? And I realized I had totally forgotten, but I actually wanted to become a judge. A judge, I'm not sure what the term in English is, but a judge for children, because I've always loved children and I wanted to be, take care of children. And so when I started studying at university, I started studying law. only to realize that after 2 years, I was definitely in the wrong career path for me. There was something, especially in those early years at law school, there was something that was very passive about, you just have to learn everything by the book. And I thought that was extremely boring. And I realized that what I really enjoyed doing was traveling, discovering new cultures, learning new things. I've always had a soft spot for luxury. So back then I decided that I wanted to work in the luxury industry and that I wanted to have a career, that would allow me to travel, which is why I started new studies focused on international relations, because that was more general. And I felt like it would allow me to, choose any career path that I wanted to do. And then after my studies, I found an internship at a luxury company, so luxury automotive. And that's how everything started. So I was literally looking for a luxury job. So I only applied at luxury companies. I was very fortunate. My entire career has always been a succession of, being lucky, like deciding this is what I want to do, and then sending out emails and letters and then getting positive responses. So I don't know if there's something about my writing style or just the fact that I dared to ask, but I remember sending that one letter that summer. I was doing an internship at a PR agency in Paris, totally bored, and sent out that one letter to Rolls-Royce and Bentley. And then 2 weeks later, I got an invitation for an interview. And then a few months later, I was starting there. So I was like, wow, amazing.
That does sound like you've got a special knack with writing. And also I'm imagining Emily in Paris, obviously,
Yeah.
spoken about show. So you're sort of dressing the part, looking the part, and then writing these probably perfectly written letters. Isn't it brilliant when we talk about letters now as well?
Yes.
Because there was no LinkedIn or whatever.
Yeah.
Or even sending an email. So actually, you had one go at writing was it handwritten, do you think?
No, well, I don't even remember if was it an email or a letter. I remember writing that thing and because I was in France and that company was based in Germany. So I had someone help me write that letter in German because back then my German wasn't as good. But was it a letter and an email? Maybe it was an email because I was in Paris. So probably it was an email that I sent with all the attachments and my, CV and reference letters for the internships that I'd done before and all that stuff.
It's great. I think you found an approach that worked in reaching out, like you said. And then your career kind of continued to go in the luxury area. What did you find to be your kind of niche?
Well, so I've always been very much about doing what I enjoy doing. So it wasn't about just following a career path, but it was more about enjoying what I was doing. And when I started in the luxury automotive industry, I realized that as much as I really liked that world, I think cars weren't going to be the industry that I would strive in because, let's be honest, it was a very, very male-dominated industry. And, being French, being exotic, I felt like I was never going to be taken seriously. So I very quickly decided that I needed to think about something else. And that first role that I had was in sales and marketing. And I realized that I really, really enjoyed the marketing part of it. So I decided to start looking into marketing. I was looking for jobs at advertising agencies or things like that because I didn't want to go back to school. I have to say one other thing that I have to comment on is that when I came to Germany, the school system in Germany is very different from the school system in France. So when I started working, I was most of the time the youngest person because everyone studied longer. So I had people like interns working for me who were older than me, which was a weird feeling. But so when I decided to shift my career to marketing, I was advised to go back to school. And I was like, no, I'm from France. Like everyone's done with school. I'm not going back to school. And I looked for a job that would allow me to learn on the job and where I could bring in my skills that I had built, previously. And that's how I got this opportunity of starting to work for a branding agency. Which is how my career in branding started. I really, really enjoyed that phase of my life working for agencies because it really allowed me to learn so much, like because you work for different clients, different brands, different verticals. There's always a different focus. So this ability to dive very quickly in a new industry is something that I learned from my agency times, but also the bandwidth of, creating a brand, whether it was from, creating the brand from scratch, defining, the vision, the mission, or all those things, or redefining them. So repositioning the brand to everything that has to do with the implementation of it. I really loved that. And that's what's shaped my career for later.
And it's so different to law, isn't it?
It is. It's very creative. So that is also something I wasn't so aware that, or I didn't realize I was a creative person, but I am a very creative person and I enjoy working in creative environments. So I'm the not to, fulfill cliches, but I'm the organized creative person. I like to bring order into chaos. And yeah, I think I've found the right path for me.
I think there's always someone that needs to manage the critical path.
Yeah.
Someone that does the thinking and there's brainstorms, but you need a critical path. Were there some favorite brands that you worked on during that time?
Well, one of the favorite brands that I ever worked for, obviously, is Bentley. Like I loved working for that brand. I also joined the company at a point that was quite pivotal in the brand's history, because until then, Bentley and Rolls-Royce were one company, and then they separated. Rolls-Royce went to BMW, Bentley went to Volkswagen, and they decided to update their brand image by launching a new car, the Continental GT. And it was a very, very exciting phase, starting this new office in Berlin. Everyone was highly experienced. The team was highly international. It was just an amazing time. And I'm still actually in close contact with a lot of my colleagues from back then, although it was almost 20 years ago. So that was one of the favorite brands that I worked for. Then there is a brand that I worked for several years that I'm not allowed to name, but it was a tobacco brand. And what I really, really liked about it wasn't the product. So it's not the cigarettes that we marketed, but it's actually the range of things that we were able to do with that brand. It was a feminine cigarette brand, so a female cigarette, and it was so fun to work on it. It was highly positioned around fashion, and all the activations that we did around that was very, very interesting.
I think I know what it was. Is it named after a magazine?
It's a competitor of that brand. It's not that one, but it's a competitor of that brand. But exactly, it's super slim cigarettes.
Yeah. And I suppose when you're working in marketing and you're working on these brand repositions and activations, a decent budget is helpful to an agency, isn't it? There's so much more that you can then do.
Yeah, that is also something that I've learned to deal with, because given that, so I've spent my career working both for agencies, but as well for companies, so in-house. And I was fortunate enough to manage very, very big budgets, but also to manage very, very small budget, and to be forced to do with as little as the company could, afford to invest in marketing. And I think that was the biggest challenge, but actually the most interesting one. Like, it gets really interesting when you don't have much and you need to focus on, okay, this is the budget that we have. It's basically nothing. What are we going to work on with that? What's the priority? And I think that has taught me a lot. And this is something that I've learned over the past couple of years, like when I started working for startups, basically, because before that I was working for big corporate companies, and, sky with the limits. And then, you just add 1 0, we'll be okay. And then working for startups, all of that started shifting. And I'm very grateful for that, because it taught me to be able to adapt, my approach.
So yeah, you went from big corporate brands and luxury brands, so hotels, music, and then into startups. It seems like a daring jump. Was that?
Is it?
Did you want to scare yourself? Was it on purpose?
It was on purpose. So I am indeed someone who likes to challenge themselves. I love a challenge, whether it's a physical challenge, like going out of my comfort zones physically or mentally. I really like that. And I realized, tech has been buzzword for many, many years already. And I always thought, okay, I feel like I'll enjoy the tech space, but I never really had the opportunity to work for a tech company in-house. I worked for tech companies as an agency, but never in-house. And then I woke up one day deciding that it was time to move back in-house and that my next company would be a tech company. So that's how I started looking for companies. I usually don't look for jobs on, job boards. My strategy is usually to go through LinkedIn and see what companies, are interesting, and then just reach out to those people. And I remember how I landed my job at the mobile marketing company that I work for. Basically, I was looking for tech companies. And then this person had a look at my profile on LinkedIn. And because I've been using LinkedIn quite actively for a long time now, I reached out to her saying, hi, I saw that you were looking at my profile. Should you be hiring? Please know that I'm looking for a job. And she said, hi, Jocelyne. Well, I am hiring. And someone dropped your name, which is why I had a look at your profile. And that's how we met up for lunch a week later. And then 3 weeks later, I was starting at that company. So that's how my tech job came to me.
Started, and you didn't have to write any handwritten letters.
I didn't have to write any handwritten letters.
So how was that being, by that point, you'd already had like a good decade or more in marketing, and then you jumped into a tech role. Is that right?
Yeah.
And so how was that jumping into such a different job?
So it's an interesting question. I think the older you get, the less impressed or intimidated you get by situations. Before starting that tech role, what I have to say was that I worked on a freelance basis for several years, because when I became a mother, I felt like that phase of my life would be focused on my kids. Like the priority were my children. So I didn't want to work full time. I wanted to be the master of my time, and moving to the tech company was also getting back to a full-time in-house position, which was a big change after, working freelance for 8 years. I guess the most interesting part, I started there as a head of brands, and having worked for several big companies before, or branding agencies, I just assumed that everyone knew what a brand was. And starting to work at a tech company, I realized that the notion of brands was like a foreign word to them. Like no one really understood what brand was. Like some people told me or thought I was, the new person responsible for the logo. Other people were very challenged to actually understand how, I was fitting into this marketing organization. So that was a surprise, but it was actually a great opportunity for me to understand the challenge and to understand that I was not going to be able to do it alone. I had to do a lot of advocacy and to train people and educate them about what brand was. So I started hosting workshops with all the newbies that were onboarding, like from the very week at the company, telling people, okay, so this is what branding means. This is how our brand works. This is when you need to reach out to me. And also making people understand that a brand it's not just your logo or your whatever keynote presentation. It's actually the way the market perceives you. And that way is shaped by the way you interact with the outside world. So if I go to a company tonight saying, hey, I'm working for this company, and start behaving weird, that's what's going to stick in people's mind. If I talk about my company, or if I fire people for no good reason and get backlashed on LinkedIn, like all those things, those interactions with the external world, that's what people remember of our brand. And on the other side, the positive things that people think about our brands are actually not random. They're shaped by those organizations. So it was a fun task to explain to everyone and, make people understand that everyone was responsible of branding, whether you were a receptionist or, a salesperson, customer success person, or a localization team member. Everyone was actually responsible for the way our brand was perceived.
Which makes lots of sense. And yet it was also very brave of you to go in when you're new to a business. I always think, at what point do you begin to impose and begin to drive something? Because a lot of the time you're there to say, oh, I'm watching and I'm observing.
Yeah.
And trying to make that judgment call, isn't it? Okay, I'm here
Yeah.
to do a certain thing, but at what point am I here to lead in this sense, or do I need to watch things and do things in a different way? And that, I don't know, to me, that sounds like it takes a mix of experience to know, and probably a bit of judgment at the same time.
I totally agree with that. So I think there's no one size fits all. For me personally, it really is something that depends on the company, that depends on the management board. I will say that usually I like to give myself 3 months to really understand what a company is about, what the product is about, and kind of like, let it sink in order to be able to market that product the best way I can. But I know that, for example, my previous company, the DeFi protocol that I worked for, results were expected very, very quickly, which was very challenging because the management team wasn't even aligned on what the product was. So I was supposed to market something that people didn't agree on, about what it was. So in those cases, yeah, you need to be creative and think out of the box and, start doing things on a more general level, maybe. But so to answer your question, I would say it's very different, like from case to case. Each company is different, especially for startups, depending on what phase of their growth they are at. I will act differently. But what I prefer to do is to take 3 months to observe. And obviously, at my level, being a leader and a manager, I usually have a team that I manage. So when I arrive somewhere, there's already a team in place, and I like to take the time to see how they proceed and operate, and just, observe before being able to make the call on what changes need to be made. Or sometimes those changes aren't as big as you would have expected from the outside.
I remember actually one of my guests saying that those 3 months, she takes a similar amount of time, and says to her girlfriends, you're probably not going to hear from me for 3 months because I go so into that. So it sounds like, if possible, taking 3 months to genuinely understand how things operate around here.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny that you're saying that, because I didn't mention it, but I also usually take the time to speak to everyone within the organization, especially working for startups. You tend to realize that there's dichotomy between the perception the founders usually have of their company and the perception employees have of that company. In some cases, I also like to speak to some clients and customers just to, find out how they perceive you as a brand, because, marketing has to do with branding a lot. So like understanding how people or our customers perceive our brand, and also in some cases, if they can tell me what makes us different from our competitors, that's also something that I'm very interested in hearing.
I'm trying to write notes underneath the table as speaking, but I'll watch the recording back. And so then you've now moved into what I would regard as a very different step from brand, even though you went from branding into tech. My understanding is you're a consultant in the Web3 space. Is that correct? Can you expand on that?
It's correct. So I'm a marketing consultant. So I'm really sticking to marketing because that's my background, that's the experience and the skills that I have. I joined the Web3 space a year and a half ago. I started with crypto, like a lot of us, started investing in crypto and then realized that in order to be a good investor, I needed to understand, what I was investing in. That's how I started educating myself. And the more I read about the cryptocurrencies, the more I understood the whole concept of blockchains and decentralization. And I thought that was very, very exciting. So I started, reading content, going to events and things like that, and decided that that was going to be my next career move because I was so passionate about it. And as I mentioned earlier, I like to do things that I enjoy doing, not things that I have to do, but things that I like to do. And yeah, that's how I started in this space. Is it different? Yes, it is. It's very, very different. And that's part of the things that make this space so exciting. It's the fact that I feel like we're still in the process of shaping things. So the Web3 space itself, is still in the process of, defining itself, but marketing as well. A year ago, when I started, people would agree that marketing in Web3 was mainly exclusively about community building. So people were thinking about how to engage with their communities on Telegram, on Discord, all those channels. Now, a year later, being in the bear markets that we are in, people realize that back then the community building was only so successful because we were in a bull market, and it didn't really matter, as long as people were fed the success stories that they wanted to hear. Now in the current markets, people or companies are realizing that having a structured marketing plan is very, very important. And that's where my background and my expertise comes in action, because what I have and what I was told a year ago wasn't really relevant for this space. All of a sudden, it's very, very relevant, because a lot of the marketers that started their marketing journey in Web3 actually have very little idea of what marketing is. Yeah, they don't really have the right tools to implement a marketing strategy as it should be implemented. So the space is different because it's still evolving. There are obviously very different narratives, very different channels that you use. But I would say that the process itself is always the same. So for me, that's not new. That's not something that I'm learning. What's new is the industry itself, the target audience and all of that. It's an industry that has its own culture. And that's something that you really need to be interested in and to understand if you want to be good at what you're doing.
I mean, it sounds radically different, again, from the traditional Bentley and Rolls-Royce.
Oh, yes.
Is that quite surprising that you've gone from brands that are known for such trusted qualities to something that Web3 is, I want to go back and ask you a few more questions about those things that you said, bull market, bear market, crypto, etc. It actually, some of those come with negative connotations as well, don't they? So there's this huge contrast between the brands that you've worked on, and probably the job that you've got to do now is probably quite a tricky one.
Yes, well, definitely. All the jobs that I've had in my career so far, there aren't two roles that were comparable. I think every and each of the roles that I've had in my career have been very, very different. But as I mentioned earlier, I like to be challenged. I have to say, I start getting nervous when I'm in my comfort zone for too long. Like, I love this feeling of, oh my God, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. Like this feeling of, I don't think this is what I'm made for, because, that's when I start being good. That's when I don't know what it is, but this force in me arises and tries to prove me wrong and tries to prove me that I am actually able to do it. That's just how I work.
That's crazy, isn't it? You got to push yourself to the brink.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the genius comes. I suppose that is the comfort zone, though, isn't it? And that's growth mindset that you've got.
Yeah, yes. I'm definitely highly committed to my personal growth on all levels. So whether it's career, as I was mentioning earlier, physically as well, but also mentally, I work a lot on myself. And I think it's a journey. I don't think I'll ever arrive to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm done. I have it all figured out. What I really enjoy is the journey.
I mean, this is a super interesting point as well. I personally think that if you get to a good place in your 40s, you normally have done a bit of work on yourself. I think maybe sometimes you're forced to, maybe
Yeah.
relationships gone wrong or there's been challenges with just life.
Yeah.
What does working on yourself look like in your mind?
Well, working on myself means a lot of things. Working on myself, first of all, means understanding myself, because as simple as it sounds, it took me a long time to realize that the way that I was also like this, always, chasing the next big challenge, it also comes from somewhere, like understanding where it comes from. Did someone in my childhood say something that made me feel like I always had to go for the next best thing? Like, where does that come from? Understanding my triggers as well, like what makes me feel insecure, what makes me feel successful. All of those things are things that I'm still working on. I've understood a lot of them, figured out a lot of them, but I'm still working on, as I said, it's a process. It's not, I don't think I'll ever be able to say, okay, I have it all figured out. It really is a process. And then understanding those things is a thing, but also applying them to your life is something else. Sometimes you get better and then there is a fallback, and it's okay. It's all part of the journey, and we need to embrace it as it comes.
Have you found that easier in your career than personal life? And I say this because sometimes in your career, you have to get feedback, work on it, and you have to show up maybe differently or certainly professionally all the time. Have you worked on your professional development a lot?
Yes. So I'm still working on that, but it's something that I've been investing a lot of time and efforts in. And I would say that what I've decided for me is that I want to be the person at work that I am in my private life. I don't want to pretend to be someone. I'm done pretending. I'm done trying to impress or whatever. I just want to be myself. And that's how I show up at work. I show up as vulnerable and confident as I am. So when I don't know something, I'm the first one to say, I don't know this. Guys, you're my team. I'm your manager, but you need to explain this to me because I don't know. The same thing with my management. And if no one knows, then let's figure it out together, because that's also something I realize, that being open about the things that I don't know makes people vulnerable as well and open up about the things they don't know. So, it puts us on a level of trust that I didn't have before, when I felt like I had to pretend that I knew this or that. And that's why I like the Web3 space so much, because here, even more than elsewhere, I'm totally confident saying, I don't know this because no one knows this, because this is still being defined right now. Like there's no need to feel bad about not knowing something. So yeah, to answer your question, I would say my way of dealing with things at work, or the way I've decided to show up, is by being myself. So, as nice, human, kind, and empathetic as I am of a person in my real life, that's how I want to show up at work as well. I've been told a few times that I was too kind, and I don't think that's feedback that I happily accept, because I don't want to be a mean person. I can be tough. I'm very tough. I know what I want, and I'm usually very direct. Like if something could have been done better, then I say it as well, but I'm always kind.
Well, Jacinda Ardern's been talked about a lot recently for that, and that leadership of being kind, empathetic, but able to push through the right things for the country or for the team or for herself. So I think you're 100% correct there. And everyone wants to work for someone that's kind. It makes you feel relaxed, doesn't it? And therefore you're more likely to work hard and feel relaxed and do your best.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's funny, I had a discussion with someone, it was actually a potential client, and they were asking me what I would like people, like ex-employees, to say about me. And I remember saying that what I would really like would be for them to say, she always made me feel good about myself. Like, that's what I want people to remember, because people will forget what you said, but people won't forget the way you made them feel. And I want people to remember me as the person who made them feel good about themselves.
That is a wonderful goal, which makes me think, actually, I would like to work with you for that reason, but also I'm thinking from a fashion point of view, because one thing that always makes me feel good is someone recognizing how hard I've worked or something that's been really
Yeah.
good. So if your leader or colleague or someone kind of says, I love what you're doing here, you know, talk me through it, or, you know, let me support you with it. I mean, I really like a compliment, and maybe not necessarily in work, but there is something about feeling good in the way that you look as well. And I'm wondering if I can make a very dodgy segue into fashion. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm trying to do. Is in terms of
There is a connection.
what makes you feel good? I'm wondering if I can talk a little bit more about fashion and you know, what fashion means to you.
What fashion means to me? That's a good question. Fashion makes me, it's a combination of aesthetics, like things that I find physically attractive. I'm that kind of person that likes beauty. And when I say beauty, I'm not talking about perfection, but beautiful things. You know, when I walk down the street, I always stop my kids saying, oh, did you see how perfect the light is today? Or did you see that leaf that's shaped like a heart? Like, I stop and I admire things around me. And that's exactly how I feel about fashion. So for me, it's a kind of art. For me personally, fashion is also something that makes me feel confident. It might sound weird or not, but I feel good and strong and powerful if I'm wearing something that makes me feel like that. And good and strong and powerful can be very different things. You know, it can be hiding behind something black and, you know, like white shapes. It can be wearing something very close to your body and rather short and being extremely feminine. It's always very different things depending on the context and depending on my mood. But fashion is something that makes me feel empowered.
And do you think the fashion's different in the countries that you've lived in as well? Because I remember you said you'd lived in, well, you're from France, live in Berlin, you've lived in England, lived in Nigeria at one point as well. I mean, there's lots of places. I mean, I'm wondering if you did the London, Berlin, Paris kind of comparison. How would you compare them?
I never compared, but I would say that of all those places that you just mentioned, I would say Germany is the place where I have the feeling that fashion plays the least important role. It is important also for women, but I feel like the sense of fashion is very, very strong in France. I felt that in London as well, in the UK. I felt that it was very important for women to look good, to look feminine. The sense of fashion there is also, and I'm sure you would agree with that, is much more feminine. Nigeria is actually where I was born. I'm half Nigerian. My mother is from Nigeria. My dad is French, and they met in Nigeria. So I spent the first 15 years of my life in Nigeria. And I can say that for African women and for Nigerian women, fashion is very, very important. It's what defines you as a person, but it's also what shows your role in society. You know, like the outfits that you wear, the fabrics that you choose. Usually women get their outfits done by a tailor, so everything is customized because of that importance of your wardrobe. So yeah, definitely fashion is very important, or has always played a big role in all the countries that I've lived in.
It's a really cool influence that you would have had 15 years in Nigeria, where fashion was such a expression, quite a personal expression, to then France, which has got a real strong fashion look, and then suddenly going to Berlin, which is less about fashion, but is so well known for being cool.
Yeah, it's funny because I mean it kind of changed, because I was mentioning earlier to you that I've adapted my style to Berlin. But I remember when I came here at the very beginning, people used to tell me all the time that I was so elegant. Oh my God, you're so elegant. And I really didn't understand what they meant, because I was not elegant. Like, I didn't make an effort to be elegant compared to the elegance that I had in France. People were like, oh my God, you look so elegant. I was like, no, this is just my work outfit. So yeah, things have definitely evolved.
Funny how different it can be. And then you don't want to get into bad habits, do you? And then go back to the old crew in France and them saying, "What's happened to you? What's
Well, I do hear that every now and then.
happened?"
Well, not what's happened to you, but you've changed a lot.
It happens. I've moved away. Now you've got twins, and I'm wondering, how you describe yourself as a mother. How is career and motherhood? I mean, it must be. Are they at an age now where you feel like they're quite grown up now? Not grown up, but
Yes, so they're now officially teenagers. It's their birthday month, sorry. And they are at an age where they still do need me quite a lot because they have so many questions about life and human interactions, careers and stuff like that. But the kind of mentoring or guidance that I give them is definitely different than what I've given them before that, because, it was really about taking care of them. And now it's really about guiding them. And I love that role. The fact that they're grown up or bigger now is also allowing me to give more space to my own needs and my own objectives, because I'm a very present mom and I'm there for them, but I also have room to be working on my own personal goals. So that's amazing. And what kind of mom I am, I will say that, so I'm a cultural mix, physically or genetically, and I'm also a mix of all those cultures as a mother. I'm still kind of stuck between this very French and very African old-fashioned education that I grew up with. And I'm trying to distance myself from that and being very critical about some of the things that I grew up with and that I don't want to hand over to my kids. But, I'm just myself. I'm not a machine. So those patterns come out every now and then. And I do empower my kids to challenge me and tell me, listen, this is what I want you to remember. I might act like that every now and then, but it's your role to tell me that, I'm acting the exact way that I didn't want to act. So what I was saying about my leadership style is also my parenting style. I'm very vulnerable with my kids. I teach them the things that I think that are important, but I also always remind them that I'm far from being perfect, that I wasn't born a mother, they made me a mother and we're growing together. And yeah, I really like it. I have to say this is something that I'm quite proud of, and I think that I'm doing a good job.
it sounds like it. And also, well, once you're over a few years as well, I mean, it sounds like you do get on. I always think you must reap the rewards, as the children grow up and you get these small adults to hang out with and spend time with. You've got, friends or people that you just really like to spend time with, which is
my favorite people. I call them my favorite people.
Favorite people, yeah. You're like, please, I've created you. You need to be really good people that I want to spend time with.
Yeah.
So you've talked about this being your decade, which I just think sounds totally what you deserve and incredibly motivating. What have you got planned, or what are you hoping to achieve over this decade?
So yes, indeed, the 40 is going to be my decade, and when I say my decade, it means it's going to be mainly about myself. I'm very selfish now. Like, I'm very focused on my own personal goals, and I'm totally fine with that. There are different aspects of it. First of all, the health aspect. So I'm very much into working out. I train quite regularly. I eat very healthy. I'm French, so I love wine and I love good food. But I'm very conscious about the way I take care of my body and spend a lot of time making sure, I'm grateful and I show it, physically. So challenging myself physically, doing anything that I didn't do before. I started working out and doing CrossFit recently, and that's something that I really enjoy. It's very challenging for me because I was never a really athletic person, but those are the goals that I'm setting myself. Like, seeing my body change as well is something that's very rewarding. Seeing, muscles at places where you didn't even think you had muscles. I really enjoy that. So my health is definitely one of my priorities. Family, my children, but I also have a brother and a sister. My mother is in France. My sister lives in Japan. My brother lives in Singapore. So my family is quite spread out over the world, and I want to spend time with them. So traveling is also something that I'll be doing a lot. And then my career is something that I want to focus more on. Until now, I've always been very ambitious and was always lucky enough to find roles that really reflected what I wanted to do. But I feel like in this decade, it's going to be my time to, get things to the next level, because there's no one else to take care of now anymore, kind of, and the focus will be solely on myself, and I'm very excited about that.
Sounds great. I mean, CrossFit is hardcore though, so I'm
Right.
take my hat off to you for that, because I think I went once and never went back.
So what's your thing? Are you more the yoga person?
I'm actually weights and running, but
Oh, wow.
you do need to mix it up, do you? I mean, I'm currently doing quite a lot of yoga, but you
Okay.
do need to mix it up. You are right,
Yeah.
because I can put on a pair of trainers and just run and just love it, and I have to force myself to do something different. And I think going to CrossFit was a shock to the system, but it would be a good thing for my body.
Yeah, because your body starts getting used to it, and then it's good to challenge yourself. Before starting CrossFit, I was very much into indoor cycling. So the Peloton, Soul Cycle kind of thing. I was literally addicted to that, and I thought I was really fit. And then I started CrossFit. I was like, oh my God, it's like starting from scratch. So
I think that's why I didn't like it, because I thought I'm a fit person. This makes me feel fit.
See, that's the challenge that I'm talking about, challenging yourself and realizing, oh my God, I'm going to have to work for this.
I'm gonna have to swing on that bar up there. I don't know how to manage that. Just on health specifically, actually, one point is around sleep. I'm curious how you sleep, especially in an area such as, well, working with startups, working in Web3, working in roles that do have an element of stress in them at times across your career. Do those things ever affect your sleep?
The honest answer is no.
Yeah, good.
I've always been a really, really good sleeper, and my sleep is very important to me. So I need my 8 hours, no matter, like, if I don't get my 8 hours, I'm a bad person, a terrible and very unpleasant person. So I need to get my 8 hours, and I'm a good sleeper. Like, I go to bed and I fall asleep. It's very, very rare that I don't manage to fall asleep immediately. I've also kind of I changed my diet because I realized that the later I eat in the evening, the more complicated it gets to fall asleep. So I've stopped eating in the evening as well, or like I try to eat as early as possible so I can fall asleep without any problems. And I think this is also part of the perks of being in your 40s. I've stopped worrying about certain things, because one of my first bosses, when I was back at Bentley, told me once, I remember there was like this huge issue, and then we needed to get hold of him, but he was traveling, and then he came back a week later, and he was traveling with his family and didn't want to be contacted. And when he came back, he said, so what was that huge issue? And I was like, well, it's not an issue anymore. And he said, you see, Jocelyne, that's exactly it. If you don't take, some issues don't need to be taken care of immediately. They'll just, clarify themselves without having to do anything. And that's something that I've tried to remind myself of. So not that I think that problems don't need to be taken care of, but I'm not a slave of that stress anymore. Like, if bad things happen, then they just happen. We'll find a solution, and there's nothing I can change, and stressing myself or not sleeping over it is not going to make the problem better. So that's my attitude.
Yeah, and I think you thinking and believing that will be so ingrained. That's why it doesn't wake you up in the night. So not only if something did wake you up, you'd have that quite rational conversation with yourself, but it sounds like you genuinely believe it. So therefore you can peacefully. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably part of my African heritage, like this wisdom of staying calm. I remember one of my partners was always went crazy because I tend to be late, like the fashionable French 15 minutes. But I mean, I tend to be so late that, I've missed a plane once, things like that. And that drove him crazy. And I was like, well, I missed the plane, like going crazy over it is not going to make the plane come back. So yeah, I guess that there's that very laid back attitude that I have in me that is a big help in certain situations.
There are women that might not be feeling as good at 40 as you're feeling, maybe not as high five, let's go and try something new. If that was one of your friends, what might you say to them?
That's a very good question. And thank you for saying this, because there's one thing that I really want to mention. It might sound very glamorous and very successful, but it is a bumpy process. And I didn't talk about the divorces, the loss of jobs and things like that, but I went through that as well. So it's not all about, going there and the job and the twins and this and that. It is a journey, and it's not always the easiest journey. I think what really helped me personally is two things. First of all, the commitment to doing it, like the commitment to, I'm deciding today that, I want to be a Web3 marketer, and that's what I am. And that's what I'm going to focus on, no matter how easy or complicated it is. That's my goal. The second thing is to take care of myself. That's why my health is very important to me. Being healthy, like feeling healthy in my body, because the more rest I get and the more good I feel in my body, the more power I have. There's so many things that I have to take care of, the job and the kids and my life, and all of that can get very overwhelming. And when I take care of myself, when I get my nails done, when I get my hair done, when I buy a new, top or dress, whatever, it makes me feel good and it makes me feel strong. So those are the two things that work for me: being committed to my goal and taking care of myself. And everything else is just a matter of resilience.
Resilience. I was going to say, if you've had life challenges, which is always sad to hear, yet also reassuring, because you have to, by this point, have gone through some tough times. So I'm imagining from what you've said, that's taken some resilience and then some kind of a bit of a comeback.
Yeah, and that really is something that I would like people who are watching this show to keep in mind. It's, don't compare yourself to others, and also don't base your opinion on what you're seeing, because they might be sharing, the positive things that happened, but I'm sure they've been through a lot of negative things as well. And so keep that in mind. Like, every journey is unique, and it's very much about your own journey and focusing on what you want. I think the finding your purpose already is a big process. Some people never find it, but the journey itself is worth starting.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that if you're willing to talk about life at 40, I think it's often, to your point, you've been through a little bit of rubbishness. You're not comparing your outsides, but you appreciate probably the small things, don't you? You appreciate so much more the opportunity to throw yourself into Web3, go crazy at CrossFit, or appreciate that time to have a good pop at life again, really.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. Very well said.
Well, yeah, no, I was just repeating what you said. So very, very wise.
Thank you so much, Hannah. It was such a pleasure speaking to you. And it felt like a conversation between two friends, although we just literally met right before this call. So thank you so much. And thanks for inviting me as well to share my journey. I think it's very important for women, especially women at our age, to speak about it openly, because I think a lot of women who are our age or even older feel ashamed of their age, or feel like they're already too old. And a lot of women who are younger feel overwhelmed and are not sure, what path to take. So if we can inspire them with our stories, then it's a great thing. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Take care. Bye.